The journey continues with the everlasting artist spotlight. Only this time, we go back to the beginning. My first artist for Everlasting Survivors, that being Jeff Hicks, the man who did 53 of the 68 pages. He is going to be here, in the studio, talking about what started it all for him, since he's what started it all for me. Thank you for being here at Mr. Super Oz. This video is going out, and this channel only exists because I, Oz, founded Gamble Comics, which first release was Everlasting Survivors, a 68-page graphic novel called All Day Long. Available now. Follow the link in the description that will take you to gamblecomics.com. While there, you can get hats, shirts, posters, much, much more, but most importantly, the story itself. Coming soon from Gamble Comics, BC Brute. Jeff, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. I always ask artists this first question, which is, what got it all started for you? What was your inspiration to do art, and in this case, specifically comic art?
Well, I'm glad you asked it that way because from an art standpoint, I've always been drawing. I mean, we can take it back to baby drawing on the floor with my uncles. My mom would draw with me. Like, it was just a thing I did a lot as a kid. But what got me into the comic books was the first Spider-Man movie, way back in 2002. And there was this excitement I felt about the movie. Now, you gotta remember, I was already a Spider-Man fan, games, toys, you name it, comic books, loved it. But there was this tangible excitement that I felt for this movie, and I thought, I want to be a part of this, but how can I be? I thought, I'll learn how to draw comics. I was 12 or 13 at the time, and that just made sense. So I got How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. And that started everything. I mean, I read that book from cover to cover. That introduced me to all sorts of techniques. And then it got me into other books like the Bern Hogarth books. And pretty much from like 2001 till now, if there's a book on how to draw comics, I've either read it or looked through it extensively. So that's how I got specifically into comics.
I love that because the How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way was such a prolific product when, I'm a couple years older than you, or maybe more than a couple, but for a time it was the thing that everybody sought out, I feel like. And the idea that Spider-Man from 2002 being your catalyst moment, it's fun because that franchise, that trilogy was so engaging. I mean, obviously, I feel like 2 and 1 were better than 3, but still, even going back and rewatching it, 3's not as bad as I recalled it to be.
No.
Or whatever remembered. Because that's the funny thing about memory; it can mess with you sometimes. But what? So obviously that was your start, but what was it that kept you going? Because I know that myself personally, I have always struggled to stay consistent with art. I enjoyed it, but I was always hard on myself. So what has kept you in the game?
So, like you, I hold myself to a standard, and if I don't reach that standard, I'm pretty, not down on myself, but I will push for that. And so, again, to tie it in, like, art's always been my thing. In grade school, I was always the best art student. In high school, I was the guy that was the best artist. And I've actually gone back and found some of my high school artwork, and it's terrible. But my point is, I've always been into it. And I think, really, for me, what's kept me going is this has always been I wouldn't say a pie in the sky dream, but this has been, for me, what like an athlete would train for. Like if a kid's like, I want to be in the NBA or the NFL. Mine was, I want to draw comics at Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the dream has changed because Marvel's changed, but the dream of seeing your artwork out there on posters, on billboards, seeing kids wear your T-shirts, like that always keeps me going. But the main thing is, I just love doing it. Like, every day, I like to draw. You saw me at dinner. I drew on the back of the receipt. If there's a piece of paper and some sort of scribe material, I'm going to draw. I love to do it constantly. So, like, I consider myself such a lucky guy when I do these books because I'm just having the time of my life.
Oh, it's such an uplifting mindset to have, that the thing that you do, for money is the thing that you love to do. And realistically, I personally feel that's a life's goal. Like, I've long thought, man, if I can just get to a place where this is the job, not just a thing I do to try and have a good time. But yeah, where was it that you honed your skills at, or were you just a self-taught,
I'm self-taught, but even before we worked together, I had done paid work. I mean, when I was in college, there was those little tab posters where it's like take a thing.
Yes.
And, that was for draw a comic, take a tab, and I did, and I actually got. It's funny. We worked that con. The book that I worked on like years before I ever met you was literally the booth next to us. I don't know if you remember.
I did not know that.
Because it was the cat. The day the cat got shot is the name of the book.
Okay.
And like the guy was there. I'm like, I haven't seen you in 10 years, and it was weird that he was like right next to us.
Of course.
But I mean, I study comic books and read them ad nauseum, and I also don't study them like everybody out there does, or read them. Like, for example, let's say you sit down with the newest issue of Spider-Man. You're going to start, and you're like, okay, and you read the story. Me, I might peruse every panel structure or see how the story flows, or what I really do is I try to read the comic without reading the comic. Meaning, can I surmise what the story is from these images? And in my opinion, the best comics, you could tell what's happening without reading the text.
Oh.
And so with me, everything I'm working on is how can I convey everything I need to convey without actually reading the book.
Interesting.
So right now my books are more comedic. Like with Woke Busters and Stealing Solo 2, the heavy emphasis is physical comedy.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do physical comedy in comics? Extreme reactions, over-the-top pratfalls, this and that. And so I'm always studying these things on pacing, visual language. It's more exciting than I make it sound, but it's also not, let me go on about Spider-Man superpowers. It's more, let me go on about how this is framed or this and that.
Well, it's funny that you bring it up in that way, because that helps me understand why, or even maybe how, one of your favorite things that I ever wrote makes sense. Because I wrote a wrestling match as if I was calling the wrestling match. And it was, from start to finish, how I would have had the match play out. And you were like, oh, it was so fun and engaging. But I think what now you have brought to light is that it tells the story without needing words. So there were times when I had thought about placing commentary over it, but I never paneled commentators, and I didn't want to have ethereal voices happening without establishing who they were. So I just put no play-by-play over the match. And here's the beautiful thing. It was not necessary. And you bringing up that point that the best stories are told visually in a comic book.
Yeah.
It helps me understand why that was so fun for you. And because I didn't even cross my mind. I'll be honest, when we first started working together, I didn't know what I was doing. And, it should be that way. I can't, you're not going to be an instant, I'm not going to know everything. And, everybody learns as they go along. And so, that I think is one of the things why that makes the most sense, because it was where I had the most comfort level. And after that experience, after finishing Everlasting Survivors with you, I've taken a new approach of trying to work within the wheelhouse of the artist. Because I want you to be happy. Tell me what will make you happy, and we will then do that. Because my original thought was, I have these thoughts, I want to get them out, right? But now I've evolved to the place where it's like, this is legitimately a collaborative effort, and so let's both be happy. And so I don't know, I appreciate you helping me understand something I had always known about our working relationship, but see it from a new perspective. And so,
Because you got to remember too, like I write and draw my own books independently of the stuff we've worked on,
yes.
and that's kind of what I'm always focusing on. Is like, could I like even with my roughs, I try to think about could this be interpreted without any like super detailed drawings. I'm almost just trying to like break it down to its most basic form because as a comic book consumer, especially in the independent sphere, I think a lot of people miss what makes comic books work. We get nicely drawn, very rendered pictures, but we also get like panels that just don't make sense, or we get like big splash pages and then really boring dialogue pages. And for me personally, it's how do you take, and this is why I tell you I study every era of books.
Yes.
Because you got to remember too, comic books have been around forever at this point. And I think studying each era helps basically break through dialogue scenes or exposition scenes, just things that aren't necessarily the most fun to draw or pay attention to. But I make sure that because the stories I'm currently telling or in the future will tell require human interaction, but you can't have it be boring. Nobody wants to read the Avengers sit around for 5 pages. They want to see them fight. So that's kind of my edict.
Yeah, no, you have given me a new perspective or a broader perspective on, because we talked about earlier off camera that I had thought about buying the first 900 news comics of Superman collected in the beautiful hardcover. That was reasonably priced, but I didn't pick it up. But now, after spending most of the day with you, I think I probably will, when I see it again, pick it up, because it's one of those things where it was the first hit. It was the thing that made it all.
He's the superhero.
Absolutely, and it is something that should be studied. And because there is a character in my mind that will be Gamble Comics' version of Superman, if you will, and by that I mean the one you look up to, that type of concept, and it's good to know what made the man before trying to do it myself. So
yeah.
I appreciate that about your thought process, and your friendship is just bringing perspective to the world of comics.
Well, first off, thank you for the compliment, because I hold our friendship in high regard too, even beyond a working relationship. We're buddies for life.
Absolutely.
But I talk about comics. I try to I don't want to say evangelize, but I kind of want to teach people, because so many people want to jump into the independent sphere. And I don't think everybody knows how to. And I don't want people to get disappointed and give up on their dreams. And I also don't want an influx of garbage.
That's true.
Because it hurts all of us.
Yes.
And, I'm very happy for every independent person that does bigger than me. I don't care. There's no jealousy there.
Of course.
But I just want to make sure that let's say we have one audience, like all of us. I just want to make sure we're being served properly. And I think there's a lot of little things that people just don't get about comics. If I were to teach people, I'd be like, you got to read How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way and the Scott McCloud books. And I'd say read every comic you can get your hand on from the 60s on up, because the modern language starts there. And just know everything, because it makes your work better. And at the end of the day, it's a comic book. You're reading fun. It's like if I said, oh man, to really understand a wrestling game, you got to play it. Oh, woe is me, I have to play a video game.
I know, right? Yeah.
It's fun. It's not like I'm telling you to read War and Peace or write me a dissertation on Tolstoy or something. It's fun. It's Stan Lee.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's funny because my wrestling trainer, he had us all do reports on historical figures in wrestling. And again, it's not a negative, because you're researching something that you have a passion for, something that you are in this moment saying you want to pursue. Now, granted, not everybody who started on the first day of training was there when we all, when it was all said and done, but that was part of the process, is to figure out if you actually want to be here or not. And I think that having that good foundation, like you said, and it's not a punishment. It's just knowledge that will help the entire comic world. And I love that it's out there. It's able to be consumed, and that's something that bothers me about people who make believe like comics are a lesser medium, is that clearly you aren't actually looking or trying to, because yeah, sure, there might be not good comics, right?
Oh, tons of them.
Tons of them, yeah. But that's the thing, is like there are tons of bad movies, tons of bad albums, tons of bad everything. And so to pretend as though that comics are just bad because you think that's what they are, you're wrong.
Exactly.
Like my goodness, there's so much good to be found.
Yeah, and like I said, at the end of the day, even the bad ones are still fun to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I love Spider-Man.
And perhaps you can even learn what not to do by
Exactly.
consuming the bad. Because there have been times where, actually, there's this book called Gigantic. It is very, so it's printed in a good form. The art is good, but the story is so lazy. And yes, I read it. But it just tells me what not to do. It's like, wow, could I do this? Probably, but do I want to do this? Heck no. And so that's something to take away, even from the bad, is the idea of what to avoid.
I do that with a lot of 90s comic books.
Mm.
Because
all the pouches?
Well, not even the pouches.
I'm just
Because, I'm looking up at the Wildcats figures. And I'm like, those are some decent designs. There are
Jim Lee's
one of the best ever.
I know,
like,
right?
I want to meet that guy.
Yeah.
When we were working the show, I tried to, but we were busy.
The line was busy too.
The thing is, we had a good problem. We had people at that table constantly.
Sold out of Jeff's cover A on that show. So
that was one of the most fun comic shows I've worked, because I've been lucky that like the shows are successful for me, but this was like one of my favorite ones. But I will look back at, I love Spider-Man, but I will look back at a lot of non-amazing Spider-Man issues from the 90s, or any of the non-A-list superhero titles. They all have like they want to be Todd McFarlane or Jim Lee or Eric Larson or Rob Liefeld, but they're poorly drawn imitations of that.
Gotcha, yeah.
And so things I always try to avoid are some of those 90s faux pas, like the squinted eyes that on every face. There's just, because there was such a demand, they had to be produced quickly. And those guys are talented. I'm not here to knock anybody.
Absolutely.
But I don't look up to them like I look up to like John Byrne or John Romita or some of these guys that I go, or Neil Adams, like, what a piece of art. Like, every page. Because I bought another giant-sized book recently of these Neil Adams, and I'm just sitting there staring at it like, oh my God, look at how the cape goes. Look at the ribs. Like, that's what I want out of a comic. I want to be wowed.
Him and George Perez are two guys that...
Met them both.
I feel like always over-delivered. Like, I'd watched multiple documentaries where writers would say, oh, I asked for this, and they gave me this. And it's just vastly different because it's the collaborative effort. It's the idea of like, oh, I asked for a command center shot, but I get this, like, 3 layers of deep of so much detail. And, yeah, no, I think that's one of the beautiful things about working together. Like, for the upcoming Gamble Comics project, BC Brute, the the main character, Mattathias, he gets taken up into the air by a creature, and it's trying to, they're fighting, right? And so I have Mattathias scripted to get away and fall, but the artist was smart enough to think he might not make it from this. I mean, I knew I was putting him through some hard times. There are multiple times in the story I'm like, is this dude even going to make it to the end? I'm not sure. But I wanted to give the hero a struggle.
Oh yeah, that's the best story type.
And so he had the thought process, the smart call, to use the cape to like lessen the impact.
Yeah.
To slow,
like a parachute almost.
Almost like a parachute. Yeah, to slow the descent. And it's because he was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't ask. I just envisioned this and did it. I was like, you probably saved his life right there. Whereas I was willing to let him die.
Just drop it. Ow. He has to walk around with a messed up shoulder the next issue. Like, they would do that with Spider-Man. It's like, oh, my webs didn't work. So then the next 3 issues, he's in a sling running around. He looks like a goober. But
absolutely,
hey, continuity is important.
Continuity is important. That's for sure.
I have taken great lengths for continuity in my books, like with Wokebusters. I would like, hell, I would even like kind of try to measure how far, make sure every sideburn was like the right length from the ear. Like I care, you know.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's amazing the the fact of sequential art. Like I worry, and I know that you think that I've got it, but I worry that from panel to panel I might lose it, and and so that's why I've always
That
paid
you mean
people.
like you mean lose it in terms of like continuity?
Continuity, consistency, familiarity, if you will. Like the that's always been a fear of mine when going from beat to beat and like, oh man, does it look right, right? And so no, I don't know. It's just like this thing that irks me.
I get it.
That I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna trip up and look bad.
Once you're in the trenches, though, like we use Woke Busters as an example, like you got to remember, okay, that's a 100-page story. I drew those characters hundreds of times.
Yes.
But when you get into it, it's just like a system. Like this guy's an oval, this guy's a circle, this guy's a weird square-shaped head, and then you just get used to building that, and then it comes to you so quick. Like my dream gig would be like a Spider-Man at Marvel, but that would be like the easiest thing in the world to draw because it's just a body with a couple of lines. People are like, "Oh, the webbing's so hard." No, the webbing's easy. It's just how you add depth to a superhero by basically in art you could do this thing called rounding the form. It's like when you add little lines in the muscles and stuff. It's like to add like hatch lines and stuff. But with Spider-Man, his webbing literally rounds the
job
form.
for you.
Like if you look at it, it's easy. Just draw like circles around his body, and that's it. And then the webs are just lines.
That's awesome.
That's what the thing is like. Where I get to, it's like I'm able to break stuff down and look at everything as just kind of a shape, like even on a person. So I might see a person like you have a square head or you have this and that, and then it helps with real life too because you can do portraits quicker. I can look at like the shorthand of what makes your face, and rough out something quickly. And in a little bit, like a couple of moments, I got like a really rough version of your face, and I can go in and refine it.
That explains how the amusement park and fair people can knock it out quick. Because I was always curious, because I've dabbled, I've attempted, I've played around, but it always takes me time. Like a couple weeks ago, maybe a month or so, I sent you a picture of a thing I was drawing.
Yeah.
And then by the next day, it was getting tighter. It was getting more refined. And so it's always been a struggle for me to be like, how do these people do this? Just like,
well, it's just repetition.
Exactly, repetition.
And also, too, a lot of people just draw with their wrist. You're supposed to draw with your shoulder. And that's how you get, like, those gestures and those swooping lines. Like, here's something I'll teach everybody that I learned. Watch a great artist draw because you will learn. And if you watch how they get a line, you will instinctively try to copy that. And then you'll see yourself improve. Like I tell you about these artist edition books I buy. They're these big books, folks. They're the same size of art that the artist drew on the paper. Buy those and read them. You can figure out where to start, what's drawn in, what's not drawn in, what's blacked out, all of these things. Oh, my book, they're about this size.
About this size.
Now, to be fair, this book is bigger than what I drew it on, because I drew it on an iPad.
Right.
And, the iPad wasn't this big, but...
it just felt appropriate.
Yeah, look, I thank you for backing this one. I haven't looked at it in a year, because I don't,
Of course.
I move Woke Busters, or Stealing Solo stuff. I touch that every day, but I haven't looked at it, Tits and Art in a while.
Of course, yeah. No, I just... I have it handy because I've been playing around with the idea of printing in a larger format because the artist draws in a large format. But we had talked about this earlier in the day, but I do believe I'm going to go traditional size floppy because it's what everybody is used to. Storage and protection and all that. But no, I'm always for the success of Jeff because had it not been for that that trip to Cincinnati Comic Expo, which is weird because it turns out we were already at the same places at different points in time, we just didn't know it.
Yep.
Like
same wrestling
events, exactly. But that day The Rock brought us together unknowingly.
Yeah, I found that file of that print.
That's awesome.
Because I went through an old hard drive and I found all my old prints. So.
Oh, yeah, there's the Ron Simmons that we were talking about earlier.
That was fun. That was back in my con days. So if anybody wonders, when I got out of college, I just started working the con circuit. Like, I met you at my second show ever. But I worked Horror Hound, Cincinnati Comic Expo. I did the tri-state area, but YouTube became a thing. By 2017, it was like a job.
Exactly.
And then I dropped Stealing Solo in 2018, and now we're on the sequel.
Yeah.
So
That's it's very exciting the progress that you and somewhat me too have made. But I mean, you're farther ahead with it. But the thing is, I told Aaron recently because he was apprehensive. He was like, "Oh, I hope this is a hit." I said, "Whether BC Brood is a hit or not, we're not stopping." I was like, "We are going to keep pushing forward because I and when I say this, I ought to believe it, but I believe that something is going to take off because while I do enjoy Everlasting Fibers, I feel like that it was well done on both of our behalves. We both agree that it's not the best thing we've ever done because we were both learning. And now that we've both learned, we're both growing and things are getting better all the time. And so, yeah, I appreciate everything from you. And I especially appreciate you being here with me.
of course,
And hopefully we can have a part two. I know that Aaron and Adam from the prior versions of the Everlasting Artist Spotlight have both talked about returning to the channel and continuing to talk about the evolution of their journeys. And the fact is, you're always welcome here because again, without you, there is no Everlasting Survivors. And it's funny because there was a period of time, even given all the work that you did, it might not have come out had it not been for the fact that you promoted it in the back of Stealing Solo, because that is what gave me the kick to say, well, I have to get it out because you're letting people know it exists. Because when it was just you and me, I was like, oh, maybe this is all that it'll ever be. But once everybody else knew it, couldn't be that.
I was so into that project. It's funny, you said about how we've grown as creators.
Yep.
I still look back, especially in that scene in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I was feeling it, and I still look back and I'm like, all right, because you gotta remember, other stuff I had worked on was not superhero, and I don't do superhero stuff not because I'm not interested. It's just like I got a couple stories I gotta tell.
Absolutely.
And then I want to do superhero stuff. Yeah. Like every day when I talk about drawing, I will draw from life, I will draw from pictures, and then I'll pull out comics or like iconic poses, and I'll draw those. To be honest, a lot of it's for speed because it's like how quick can I put it together?
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, because you can't rush it.
Yeah.
But I do have because I can get paid. Like I can get a full page penciled and inked. More, I could get, depending on the quality, what's on the page, I can get more than one done in a day. It just depends on what it is. Because I don't. This is just as a fan, I don't like over rendered art.
Okay.
I love to look at a lot of that.
You mean like by over rendered? You mean like photorealistic? Is that what you mean?
Well, I mean like a million hatch lines.
Oh,
like
okay.
I love Jim Lee's artwork.
Okay.
And I like looking at it, but I don't like drawing hatch lines for muscles. I don't like the way, I really just don't like 90s image books to draw. I think, like, for me, if you're like, Jeff, who would you draw like? If you took like John Romita and John Buscema and maybe a couple other guys and threw them in a blender, that's kind of what I'm shooting for, because I like a guy like Alex Toth. You might not know him, but he designed a lot of Hanna-Barbera stuff.
Oh, okay.
I like
Hanna-Barbera.
Like, what my idealized form of my art is realistic proportions with like a slightly cartoony face.
Okay.
Because you can show more emotion, but then the characters kind of have weight to them. I don't want to do like a guy with a giant head and a giant, you know what I'm saying? Like, I have a certain style I'm shooting for, but that always comes with a clean black line.
Yes.
And it's not, because I think what I find interesting and exciting is trying to look at a guy who can take something detailed and distill it down, and you go, wow, that is not as elaborate, but it's so impactful, like a big heavy black or this or that. Like, there are visual shortcuts that I find impressive and that I'm shooting for. Not because I want to be lazy or cut time. I just think the refined finished look is so much more appealing than every blade of grass and every little hair. And I hate when guys get a bunch of lines down their face to show an expression. I don't do that. I think you should find ways to do it and then use the color to enable that and just really build on that. So I have a style that I'm shooting for, and I'm almost there.
Yeah, no, I think having a goal is so important. And yeah, no, I love both your style and again your persistence.
Thank you.
And that's That's why I am always going to be pro the success of Jeff Hicks.
Well, I'm going to be the pro of the success of you because your dedication's infectious. You are far like I tell this to people like Oz hustles. I respect that. Like we'll work these shows together, and I have the benefit of the YouTube channel. I'm not going to deny it. Like I put up the banner, people recognize it, they'll buy the book.
Absolutely.
I'm lucky.
And people recognize your voice too. That also helps. True. Yeah.
But you are like, hey, you like comics? You like this? And I'm like, that is a great pitch. So I'm just letting you know. Like you talk about my stuff, I look at you too.
Here's how that actually comes to be. Because the first time we worked together at a con, you thought I was being pushy. Maybe not super pushy, but like, oh, let them come to you. But what I was doing was just treating the people at the con like I would treat anybody at my day job, and just being polite. Hey, how you doing? Do you like this kind of? I mean, obviously we're all here, so like
like comics.
You at least roughly like the medium. And as soon as you realized I wasn't trying to push for a sale, I was just being friendly. It was a complete change, and for the best to do, because being able to have that one-to-one connection, and we even had it when we set up at the Laughing Ogre to promote both of our projects. You know, having that dialogue with the public is so helpful, because if they see us as approachable, as friendly, then I always feel like that's more likely for them to want to participate, because that's how I felt about Colt Cabana's The Art of Wrestling podcast. I even told him when we met, I said, oh, I feel like we're friends, because I listened to so many of his episodes live in a studio apartment. Then he asked me, he's like, oh, what's your name? I said, Oz. He's like, well, or no, I didn't say I feel like we're friends. I said I feel like I know you. And he said, well, what's your name? I said, Oz. He's like, well, Oz, now we know each other. And it's that connection that I love. Like, in a world where I had stacks of cash, all the money in the world, pretty much going to cons would be my life. Like, don't get me wrong, I'd still write, but what I long for is that togetherness, that one-to-one. And I think that's why that my favorite videos on the channel are when me and a person are together, and it's not just me talking about wrestling or a movie or whatever that thing is by myself, because it's hollow because I'm by myself. Whereas when you are here or someone else is here, it's more real.
Remember, I've been doing YouTube for a while, and my audience is a wall.
Yes, exactly.
It's my microphone, my script, the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of imagine, honestly, when I talk about comics, I go, in my mind, I go, Stan Lee, and I like, put it on like this, true believer.
I love that.
Because it's a game,
mm-hmm.
but it's fun, and you just got to differentiate yourself. And I think one of the things you can do to differentiate yourself is to look at the past, because back then you had to sell these books. They were new. Like, people didn't know what Spider-Man was.
That's true.
How do you sell Spider-Man?
Even the publishers didn't think Spider-Man would sell.
That's why it was thrown in Amazing Fantasy 15. If it fails, it fails. It's the last issue. Like,
exactly.
Like I said, I think my main thing for anybody out there that wants to do this, obviously you need to know how to draw, but it's not just like studying how to draw a book. It's watching movies. It's learning how to tell a story. It's reading books. Hell, it's even watching weird movies like expressionistic films or foreign films. Hell, watch noir, black and white. They do some really cool camera techniques and these really interesting things that, you can do on paper and elevate yourself. If anything, folks, if you're going to try to get into comics today, obviously you have to have a good story in the art, but like, get the tools. Like, get yourself an iPad, learn how to do it digitally, because that's what I will teach anybody too. Like, go digital, because for a couple $100, you now are ahead of the curve, and your work can always look better because you don't have to worry about scanning it or fixing it or doing any of that stuff. And everybody colors digitally anyway, so I mean, you're just cutting out the middleman.
Absolutely.
And that's what the professionals use anyway.
Does FedEx even need your money? That's the question.
Only time FedEx gets money from me is when I have to ship a book internationally.
Gotcha,
that's
right.
the only time I ever deal with FedEx.
So I scan a lot of Aaron stuff in. That's why I made that joke.
Back when I met you, FedEx was my go-to place for all my convention prints.
Exactly.
I would do all my work, and I'd take whatever I had, and I'd be like, all right, I need these printed, and I'd sit and get my FedEx boxes, load them in my car. Yeah, it was an old system. Very happy I did it.
Yeah.
Very happy I don't do it now.
Exactly.
But honestly, it's just like back then it was like the crapshoot of what should I draw. I would like go to the con website and go, okay, these people are here. Well, I gotta have a piece for this, and so then it would be like a mad dash to do these pieces based on when the con availability was. Now I have the luxury of, oh, the next book I gotta get it out by this time, but I don't have to like go to a website and see who's gonna be there and draw pictures and hope. But I have to say that was exciting, and
Absolutely.
it really got me in front of some cool people. Like got the Farouk picture that you have. I gave one to to Demolition, to China. I was the last person to ever meet her as a fan. And I know for sure because I took her the stuff at the end of the day when the con was closed,
Yep.
and she put me on her YouTube channel.
Yep.
So I loved China there. But like, it was a fun time.
Absolutely.
I never look back on anything and go, I'm above that. No, it was all a learning process, and I'm happy to be here, but I'm happy I went on the journey.
I agree 100%. Yeah, it's totally worth it. And yeah, like I said, I look forward to doing this conversation. Let's just say next year. Cool?
Oh, I can't wait.
Do this conversation again next year. Talk about, how Woke Busters went and how Stealing Solo.
It's called Stealing Solo: The Farce Awakens. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to put the two in the title, but the first one is a Captain's Parody. This one's The Farce Awakens, and the next one is Frankenfisher: The Bride of Solo. That book is insane, and I can't wait to get to it.
That's
I'm
awesome.
very proud of this second one, and I'm giving it everything.
Absolutely.
But this book ends in a way that no comic book has ever ended, and you're going to go, what the hell is this guy on? Which is nothing. But we're going to get to the next book, and you're going to go, oh, no way. I never realized somebody would have this much to say about the state of movies or this or that. Like, it's a very layered commentary, but not in the boring way.
Of
You will
course.
never know my books are about something until you really read it like 4 or 5 times and you go, oh, okay. Because I think that's the secret, too.
Of
You
course.
can't ever tell. Because I'm not a causey kind of guy, but I'm like, if you're going to do a book on called Woke Busters,
Yeah.
it can't be stupid. It
Yeah.
actually has to say something. So, like, I made sure that I did.
Mhm.
And same with Stealing Solo, too. And the third one, which is mean, but funny.
Well, I mean, comedy is biting, so can't.
There's a lot of biting in the third Stealing Solo, if you know
There
what
you
I
go.
mean. So,
But no, I appreciate you being on, and I look forward to your return. And yeah, thank you.
thank you, my friend.